So today what we'll be doing is looking a little bit at Latin. So how many of you have heard before that, Latin used to be a language, or is a language? Yeah, a couple of you, most of you. Great. So who can tell me one thing they know about Latin in general? Yes, Jared?
It's one of the biggest languages that makes up ours.
Great job. So that's actually a really pretty useful piece of information. So Latin makes up a lot of what English is. And that's special because, English is a language on its own, but a lot of the words have parts or came from other languages. And so knowing that Latin makes up a lot of the words in English is useful because a lot of the time, words from one language have patterns that kind of help you figure out how they're spelled. So, kind of going into the B, there are a few tips you should take into mind. First, don't get discouraged if you see a tough word, because here's a little secret. Once you see a word for the first time and it's super challenging, if you learn how to spell it, after that, it's not challenging anymore because you know how to spell it, right? And it's actually like a mind trick that's pretty cool if you think about it. And after that, at the B, you can actually ask questions to figure out more information about the word, and that can help you spell it. So do that because that's to your advantage. Don't expect success overnight because it actually takes a lot of work, and it's not about memorization. It's more about looking at all these different languages that make up English, just like we were mentioning, and learning how they kind of fit together and the patterns that make them work the way they are. And so, some study tips, right? Once you encounter words, quick question. What are some different places that you can encounter new words? Do you have any ideas? Yes?
A crossword puzzle.
A crossword puzzle, all right. Yeah?
In a book.
In a book. Mm-hmm. Anywhere else? Yeah?
In a fairy tale.
In a fairy tale, right. So many different kinds of books with many different kinds of words. Yeah? Anywhere. Great. Because one of the interesting things is that we all talk every day, right? And the language we most often use is probably English. And so a really cool thing is that if you think about it, you know thousands of words, and you never actually sat down and memorized them, right? So every day we use words, and every day you can learn new words that you can keep using after that. So, when you're at a spelling bee, there's actually a really interesting process that you can go through in your mind to recall what you've done before, what you've seen before, and if you can try to remember a word and see how it's spelled. So when you hear a word being asked, the first thing you should do, does anybody know? What's the first thing you do when you hear a word at the bee? Yeah?
You repeat the word.
You repeat the word. Can you tell me why you repeat the word? Yeah? You can try to remember how it sounds. Anything else? Yep.
So you know if you heard it
Right. And that's a pretty important part. So the judges and the pronouncer know if you heard it right. Because if you heard it wrong and you repeat the word, then they hear that and they can probably correct you on the fact that you heard it wrong. And after that, what you should do is ask the questions that you can ask in a B. So you can ask for the definition. What does definition mean? Yeah? The meaning of a word. You can ask for it used in a sentence. You can ask for the etymology. What does the etymology mean? Yeah? Right. So basically, these are all English words that are going to be asked at the B. But that word could come from some different languages. And so when you ask for the etymology, that's telling the judges to tell you what other languages the word went through before it got into English. You can ask for the part of speech. Can someone name the different parts of speech? You have nouns, right? Verbs, yeah?
Adjectives.
Adjectives. Adverbs and other fun parts of speech, but these are some of the main types. And then you can ask for it to be used in a sentence. And that can give you some kind of contextual clues. How do you use this word? And it can sort of help you remember the word, especially if you've read it in a book. Where if it was in a book, what was it part of? A sentence, right? Cool. So, who wants to watch a video of me in a spelling bee? Yeah, that would be pretty cool, right? All right, let's do this. Do we have sound?
Championship tournament. Canard.
Canard. Can I have the definition, please?
A false or unfounded report or story, especially a fabricated report as by a newspaper.
Canard. Can I have it in a sentence, please?
The report of the famous singer's death turned out to be a canard.
Canard. Can I have that part of speech?
A noun.
Can I have the language of origin?
This word is from a French word.
Canard. C-A-N-A-R-D. Canard.
That is correct.
Toby returns to...
Cool. So, has anyone seen the word canard before? No? Well, guess what? Neither had I a little bit before that. Except I'd studied it, so I'd seen it before. And I knew that it was from French, so I could apply some of the rules that I learned about words from French. And I sort of knew what sort of a pattern this would follow. Now, for those of you that for whom this is the first time here, it's really cool, but on YouTube, actually, last summer, I did a workshop at Friendswood Public Library around the same time. And the video of that workshop is actually on YouTube. So you can go to YouTube and search up Friendswood Public Library Spelling Bee Workshop, and you can watch that video for a whole bunch of cool tips just like these in that presentation. So if you're interested in this and if you want to do the spelling bee, then you should probably go look that up, and I think you'll enjoy it. So, who knows how many different languages there are in the world? Yeah?
In Spanish.
There's Spanish. Anything else? Yeah? French. Mm-hmm.
I think around 7,000.
7,000? Quite a big number. It's somewhere around there. There actually can be many more or many less, depending on what you're looking at. Because a lot of languages popped into existence and then popped out of existence. And so there are a lot of the main languages, many that are existent right now, and some that are integrated into other existing languages. So just looking at what's called the Indo-European family, you know, did you guys know that you can actually look at languages on a map, depending on like where they're spoken? Yeah? It's kind of cool, especially when you look at where they're originated, and then when they went to. So, what we'll be looking at today is Latin, right? Does anyone know where Latin was, kind of, when people spoke it? Yeah?
Near Rome.
Near Rome. And where is Rome right now?
In Italy.
In Italy. So Rome is over there in Italy, kind of in the European area. And from there, that's actually why English has a lot of Latin. You guys know where English originated? Yeah?
European center.
Yeah. So basically where the United Kingdom is right now, Great Britain, that's kind of the place where English jumbled together and formed out of that area. And so when we look at that, this is kind of a timeline of how English was formed. So you had the Celtics, which is kind of like in the area of Ireland. And then after that, you had languages like Latin and Anglo-Saxon that went into that and went into English. And so it's really weird because English seems like it should be a language of its own. But actually, when you get all the way over here, in the thousands to the 1500s, you start gathering even more of languages all across Europe, like French and Greek and Italian. And even after that, do you guys know when America was colonized? Around the 1700s, you know, Christopher Columbus. When did Christopher Columbus come? 1492, 1670, around that area, the 1500s, right? So when we had American colonization, right, around a similar time, you had the Spanish and then Mexicans eventually in the Mexican peninsula. So you actually had a lot of words from the Aztecs and the Mayans that eventually came into English, into American English before it got to, say, British English. And so it's really cool if you look at the different languages that are now parts of words in English. Because they might not seem like English words, but they actually are. But a main part of English now is Latin. So, just looking at something that's really kind of curious. Who's seen bottles of salsa before? Yeah, pretty much all of you. We live in Texas, right? So usually, it says something, if it has a label that's part in Spanish, you might see like salsa picante. Does anyone know what salsa picante means? Yeah? Yeah? Anyone? Go ahead, yeah?
Spicy salsa.
Spicy salsa? Pretty close. So salsa basically means sauce, right? And that hot sauce, yeah. So picante means hot. And hot, picante, usually means like spicy, but you can also have something that's hot for like temperature. And that's usually caliente. You ever heard the word caliente before? Yeah? And so, did you know that the word caliente is actually related to the word calorie, like you see on the number of calories that you have in food? Do you know why? No? It's because the word caliente is in Spanish, right? And if we go back to the slide where these languages came from, you can actually see that Latin over here went into what's known as the Romance languages, which includes Spanish and Italian and French. But the word calorie came into English from Latin, and the word caliente is Spanish. It's English from Spanish, and that came from Latin. So the beginning of the word with C-A-L-I actually comes from the same Latin root, cale, as it does in calorie. So the Latin root cal or calorie means hot or heat. So a calorie is a unit of heat. So just like the energy in food, it's a unit of energy measured in heat. And so caliente also means hot. Does that make sense? Did you guys just learn something new? Was it exciting? Yeah. It's pretty exciting.
So, did you know spell calories here as well?
Right. So calorie, good observation. The word calorie is spelled C-A-L-O-R-I-E, not C-A-L-I. And that has to do a lot with how the word was formed. So for example, we don't have caloente, we have caliente, right? And so even with the pronunciation, you can tell that caliente has an I, whereas calorie has an O. So, I might use the microphone. Can you guys hear me in the back a little bit? No? Okay. Let me try to remedy that. Oh, well that went wonderfully. Okay, can you hear me now? Awesome.
So you want to repeat something that you said that you
Yeah, I'll repeat some stuff. Alright, so repeating the observation that we just made. So the word calorie, right, is spelled with a C-A-L-O, whereas the word caliente is spelled with C-A-L-I. And you can tell that even looking at the pronunciation. You know, caliente has an I sound, whereas calorie has what's known as a schwa. So it's like an open vowel, calorie. And so you don't spell that with an I usually when you go into Latin. So, let's look at the dictionary and the pronunciation of these words. Let's get over here. Okay, let me go to this. Let me see if I can. Here we go. Oh, I should probably fix this before I. Anyway, let's go back. Couldn't do this. Okay, so looking at some etymology patterns, right? How many of you have heard a word that has the letter S in it? It's kind of a trick question. Everyone has heard a word with the letter S in it, right? So if we look at words specifically that come from Latin that have the sound S in it, there are a few different ways that you can spell them. So just a question about the spelling bee. How many of you have heard of a booklet called the My Spell It booklet? A few of you? Yeah? So in case you have heard of it, you know that it's organized kind of into different languages of origin. In case you haven't heard of it, I can write it down, yeah. So in case you haven't heard of it, the My Spell It booklet is basically a booklet that has some really cool words to get you started in the spelling bee. And it has them organized into languages of origin, and you can actually get access to the My Spell It booklet by going to myspellit.com. Yeah, give me a start. It's kind of hard to see. Purple. So, myspellit.com, myspellit.com. And if you go there, you'll get to see these different words from different languages of origin, and it even has these tips that can help you with these rules from different languages. Some of them I'll be going over in the Latin rules. But words from Latin from the My Spell It booklet, you can see at the very top of this. So the words that are underlined, like a simile or lucid. Does anyone know what the word lucid means? Yeah? Clear, exactly. So lucid means clear, and it comes from the Latin root lux, meaning light. So because when you put light on something, it makes it bright, right, and easy to see. And so the word lucid has a C, and it's pronounced with an S. The word science has an SC at the beginning, and that has the S sound, but then it also has another S sound at the end that's spelled with a CE. And the word necessary, right? You have a C at the beginning for ness, and then for the necessary, you have an SS. And so if you look at a word like glycogenesis, right? Does anyone have an idea what the word glycogenesis might mean? Yeah? Something to have to do with sugar, good. So you have sugar, which a sugar is glucose, right? And so glycogenesis has to do with the creation of sugar. And so Genesis has two S's for the S sound. What about the word ostensible? It means capable of being shown. And you know, for the S sound, it has two S's, right? And then you have words like centripetal. It has to do with a center. And so a center is spelled with a C. And then you can have words like scintillant with an SC. And then you have words with a CE like century or centurion or a centaur. How many of you have read about a centaur? Yeah? Yes, good. So, let's look at some practice words. In case you don't know how to read diacritical markings are basically a way of writing the sound of a word phonetically. You can go watch my workshop from last year on YouTube, and I actually go exactly through how to read these diacritical markings. So these are the diacritical markings, and it tells you exactly how to pronounce the word without the letters. Because as you know in English, if you've ever been in first grade and started learning how to spell, words aren't always spelled the way they sound. And words don't always sound the way they're spelled. So can anyone spell the word Medusa for me? Over there. Yes, you. Yes, great. M-E-D-U-S-A for Medusa. And you might have seen that in, say, Percy Jackson, probably, with a Medusa. So how many of you have read Percy Jackson? That's a lot of you. That's good to hear. It's a great series, right? Yeah. So Medusa has an S. What about the word pestilent? Anybody want to try pestilent? Has anyone heard of the word pesticide? Yeah? What do you do with a pesticide?
Spray it on bugs.
You spray it on bugs, right? So here's another thing you should think about when you see new words, right? Whenever you see a new word that you don't know, think about what it looks like and think about other words that you've seen that look like that. So you might not have seen the word pestilent before or heard a word like pestilent, but you have heard of the word pesticide. So think about pesticide. And in this case, pestilent means fatal, deadly, kind of like a pest. You want to try spelling it? Not exactly. So you said P-S-T-O-L-E-N-T, but it's actually more like pest. So P-E-S-T-I-L-E-N-T. And so just like pest that you have in your backyard, it's spelled with a P-E-S-T at the beginning. And then another trick about Latin is when you have a connected vowel, so a connected vowel is basically a vowel between two parts of a word. So in the beginning you have the part pest, right? And you've heard the word pest before, and it's like a whole unit on its own. And then after that you have the schwa, the upside down E, it's right there, and it makes the sound and you have the lent. So in pestilent, it actually has an I instead of an O, because in Latin you usually have an I in those places rather than an O. What about the word benefice? Or, yes. Almost. So benefice is actually spelled B-E-N-E-F-I-C-E. What other word does that look like that you've heard of? Yeah? Benefit, exactly. So a benefit, what is a benefit? Can somebody tell me what a benefit is? It's something good. Exactly. So a benefit is something good, and it comes from the root B-E-N-E, bene, which means good. So a benefice is an ecclesiastical office to which a revenue is attached. So in case you don't know what the word revenue means, it's basically profit, or money. And getting money is good, right? Yeah. So benefice is related to the root that means good, and then it has a CE at the end. Just like the word office, right? What does office have at the end? CE. Yeah. What about the word cirrus? It's a curl-like tuft, or a white puffy cloud, a cirrus cloud. Have you guys studied the types of clouds? Yeah? You want to try? No? You go ahead. Yeah. C-I-R-R-U-S. Exactly. Here we go. So at the beginning you have a C, and then at the end you have a US. What about the word fallacy? Anybody want to try the word fallacy? Have you heard of a logical fallacy? Yeah, go ahead. Almost. So there are actually two L's, and then at the end it's just a CY. So it's F-A-L-L-A-C-Y. And so in this case, it's very similar. And does anyone know what a mnemonic is? Have you heard of that? Yeah? Mnemonic. Tell me what it means. Exactly. So a mnemonic is something that you can use to help you remember something. So in this case, I'll write it down. So, the purple is kind of light, but a mnemonic. So a mnemonic, M-N-E-M-O-N-I-C, it actually comes from the root, that's the same root at the beginning of the word memory. So memory and mnemonic are very closely related. Now a mnemonic is something that helps you remember. And so just like that, in the word fallacy, you see how you have a CY, right? What other word in the definition has a C for the S sound? It's in green, yeah? Deceptive, exactly. What about the word adolescence? Does anyone want to try to spell that? Yes. Very close. You're just missing one letter. So the word adolescence is spelled A-D-O-L-E-S-C-E-N-C-E. And so there's actually an SC in the middle, and then a CE. The end of the word looks kind of like the word science, so it's like adolescence, except without the I. What about the word muscitation? This is a pretty challenging word. I hadn't heard this for a long time. So muscitation means the movement of your lips in speech without actually making a sound. It's almost like whispering. Yeah. Spot on. So muscitation is spelled M-U-S-S-I-T-A-T-I-O-N. So a lot of these words are really cool words, and these might be new words, right? That you're seeing for the first time. So if you want to learn these words, a cool thing that you can do is actually write it down, and then later on you can review them. So I used to do that when I was in the B because I saw a whole bunch of words that I'd never seen before. And so to actually try to remember them, I wrote them down and went back to them later on. And then the last word, incessant, continuing without interruption. Yeah? Almost. So incessant, do you want to try?
Yeah.
Alright, go ahead.
I-N-C-E-S-S-A-N-T.
Great. So incessant is actually spelled I-N-C-E-S-S-A-N-T. And so this means continuing without interruption. Challenging question. Does anyone know another word that's related to this? Has anyone heard of the word ceasefire? Or cease motion? Yeah? So the word cease is spelled C-E-A-S-E, right? But that's actually also related, and I'll write this down. So the word cease is related to the word cessation. And cessation means stopping something. So you have C-E-A-S-E, and then you have the word cessation. I think this might be actually easier to see. And so cessation actually has the same C-E-S-S as incessant, right? Yeah? Right. So, some more patterns. The K sound. How many of you have seen the word zucchini before? Someone tell me how you spell zucchini over there. Yeah? How do you spell the word zucchini? Anyone else? Yeah? Oh, okay. You said? Go ahead. Sorry. I didn't see. Almost. In the blue? Almost. So there's actually one more C and just an I at the end. So zucchini is spelled Z-U-C-C-H-I-N-I. Should I write that on the board? Let's do this. So you have Z-U-C-C-H-I-N-I. Now, this is a word that's from Italian. And so this is Latin, but sometimes they can have similar patterns. So something to think about is that, you know, how different languages have different patterns. Can someone tell me words from Spanish that are in English? Yeah? I'm sorry, I can hear you. Yeah? No, yeah. And one of the simplest words that I always think of is jalapeno, right? So you have jalapeno, and then what's the hat that you wear? Sombrero, right. So two classic Spanish words that are in English. Now to very Italian words in English. Zucchini is one of them. What's another one? I think I heard it. Yeah? Gelato. Close. Yeah, that's one of them. Another one? Yes. Pizza. And there's always spaghetti. Right? Yeah. So think about these two sets of words, right? You have jalapeno and you have spaghetti. But spaghetti is kind of like zucchini, right? So both of them have a doubled consonant. You can tell me what a consonant is. Yeah?
It's not a vowel.
A consonant is not a vowel. Exactly. What's a vowel? Yeah? A letter that's not a consonant. I mean, you're not wrong. So usually though, they're A, E, I, O, U, or sometimes Y. And so in Italian, you see the two words like spaghetti and zucchini. Spaghetti has two T's, right? You have a G-H-E-T-T-I. And zucchini, you have two C's, right? Whereas jalapeno and sombrero, you don't really double any consonants, right? That's one of the patterns to note. So over here, in this, Another thing to keep note of is whenever you go to the store, where do you see zucchini? Yeah? The produce section. The produce section of the store, right? What about pizza? Yeah? Yeah, in the frozen section, or basically in the store. So whenever you go to the store, look for new words. A lot of labels, a lot of cartons, a lot of things have really cool words that you might not have seen before. And that's how I know I got a lot of words, especially when you go to a place like, say, Walgreens. A whole bunch of medical words like medicine and other terminology are also really interesting words. So, getting here into Latin C words. Just the medical terms, for example, one word is buccinators. So, buccinators means your cheek muscles. And so, pulchritudinous means beautiful. That comes from the Latin root pulcher, P-U-L-C-H-E-R. But you also have that in the root in the word calibius. Has anyone seen the word calibius before? Yeah? Great. It's good to hear. And if you've read Percy Jackson, you may know about Dionysus, right? And so Dionysus, he actually has a counterpart, which is Bacchus. So Dionysus is the Greco-Roman name, and then you also have Bacchus, which is the Greek god of wine. So B-A-C-C-H-U-S has two C's and an H for the cup sound. And you have a word like a valedictorian, right? Anyone know another word that has a very similar part? Just think about it, yeah? Dictionary, exactly. So dictionary has D-I-C-T, right? Another word, diction. You know, your English teacher may comment on your diction or tell you to use a dictionary for your diction. So, and then you have words like qua, right? Can you tell me the simplest qua word? Yeah? Quick, quiet, yeah? Quack. Mm-hmm. Aquarium. So, can you tell me the root that aquarium comes from? Aqua, exactly. And what about aqua in another language that went from Latin? You have Spanish. What's water in Spanish? Agua, exactly. So are you beginning to see how, you know, words go from one language to another? You have aqua from Latin, and you have agua in Spanish. So you have words like aquiline, or aquatic, or soliloquy, and usually all of these follow the rule of after you have a Q, you need to have a U, right? So that's one of the rules that usually works out. Except when you get to words like in Arabic, and then it's different. But then you have some weird words like quidnunc, right? A quidnunc is somebody who is a busybody, and it's spelled Q-U-I-D-N-U-N-C. Do you guys want to try some words on your own? Yeah? The first word, fecundity. It means fruitfulness. You want to give it a try? Yes. It's alright. So fecundity is spelled F-E-C-U-N-D-I-T-Y. And they asked this at the Scripps National Spelling Bee this year. So you just learned a word that was asked at the National Spelling Bee this year. That's kind of exciting, right? What about the word facundity? It means eloquence. Who knows what eloquence means? Anybody? So if you're really eloquent, that means you can talk at length about something. You can really go on an oral essay. So facundity means eloquence. Did you want to give it a shot? Great job. So you have facundity, which is F-A-C-U-N-D-I-T-Y. So what's the difference between these two words? Yeah? Right, so one has an A and one has an E. But more importantly, the difference is that in the meaning, one means having a lot of fruit, and the other means being able to talk really well. So because of the difference in the definition, you actually have the key clue to being able to tell what word it is and how to spell it. And that's why it's important to ask for the meaning when you're at a beat. So, next word, occupancy. Yeah? Good. O-C-C-U-P-A-N-C-Y. What other word is like this? Yeah? Occupant. Or occupy. So the next word is lachrymose. Has anyone read the series of unfortunate events? Yeah? One of the books has lachrymose in the title. If you remember, maybe. Yeah? Almost. So I think the book had to do with the lachrymose lake, and it was one of the books I think where there was like a lake full of leeches, I think. But it's spelled Lachrymose, and it has to do with tears. So this is a really complicated word, but it just comes down to knowing that the k sound in this word is spelled with a ch. And then you have sclerenchyma. Sclerenchyma means a tissue in plants. Do you want to try this? Yeah. Sclerenchyma. Close. So, one tip in Latin is that when you have the k sound, you usually don't have the letter K. And that might seem counterintuitive, but it usually holds up for Latin. Did you want to give it a try? Not exactly. So sclerenchyma is actually just a little bit simpler. Did you want to try?
Scleranchina.
Almost. So, like I said, it usually doesn't have the K. What it does have instead is a C at the beginning. So S-C-L-E-R-E-N, and then C-H-Y-M-A. So actually, the end of this word, C-H-Y-M-A, you also see that in some different words like chyme or chyle. So if anyone studied the digestive system, chyle is actually what your stomach turns all the food you eat into. And then chyme is another fluid, C-H-Y-M-E. And then the next word, quiddity. It's used to describe someone who is a bit eccentric. Yeah? Another D and a Y. So quiddity is spelled with Q-U-I-D-D-I-T-Y. You tell that you got the qu part right. So what about equivalent? You studied this in math, right? Yeah? Great job. So E-Q-U-I-V-A-L-E-N-T. And what does this come from? Yeah? Equal. So it means something is equal to something else. It's equivalent to it, right? Alright. So, some more sounds. You know, this is a vowel sound, ooh, right? And it's really interesting because it basically only has one way that you can spell it. What's that way? Someone tell me what it is? A U. Right. So when you hear a oo sound in Latin, you just spell it with a oo. With a U. It's a oo and a U. So, like a word rumor, right? Or an influence, or acute, or population. All of those are spelled with just a U. You have words like pusillanimous, lacking courage, or words like nuchal, relating to your knee, or the back of your neck. And then you have sometimes the U sound. In the case that you have U, then you oftentimes have an EU. So you have words like rheumatism, with a pain in the muscles or joints. So you can have that be rheumatism, like rheumatoid arthritis, or you can have U. And then if you have the X sound, like exaggerate, that's mostly just spelled with an X. So like the word exhaust, right? Who's heard of an exhaust? Yeah. So an exhaust is just spelled with an X. And then you have an H, because it actually comes from the word hostus. And so you can also see that in words like auxiliary. Has anyone heard of the word auxiliary? If you might not have heard of the word auxiliary, have you heard of an aux chord? Yeah? So an aux chord is basically an auxiliary input chord. It's just the short way of saying that. And then if you have the E sound, if it's at the end of a plural noun, then you usually have AE. So you guys have heard of algae, right? You study it in biology. You have algae and they grow in places like ponds. But what's interesting is that algae is actually the plural of a singular word called alga. So an alga is like one tiny unit of that giant green stuff you see floating in ponds. So algae is the plural and you have AE. The same thing with antennae. The singular is antenna, right? But the plural has AE. And then if you have an I at the end of a plural noun, that usually comes when the singular has a US. Can you even tell me from up there what singular word has a US? Yeah? Yeah? Or you have words like nucleus or alumnus. So words like cactus, right? What's the plural of cactus? Cacti, yeah. So what's the plural of a nucleus? Nuclei. And then you have stuff like cumulus. You have cumuli. Stimulus. You have stimuli. Let's do some practice. How do you spell this first word? Latitudinarian. Yeah? Oh. Alright, yeah? Yeah, I can repeat it. Latitudinarian. So have you guys heard of the word latitude? Yeah. So another thing you can do is you can just break a word into parts. So latitudinarian sounds like the word latitude and then inarian, right? So who can spell latitude for me? Yeah, go ahead.
Latitude.
Yep. Latitude is Latitude. So the end of the word inarian is actually pretty simple. It's Narian. Now in the beginning of the end, who remembers what I said was the connective vowel in Latin? It was an I, right? And so latitudinarian is just like latitude, except you take off the E at the very end and you replace it with an I. Then you have latitudinarian. Latitudinarian. What about cupreous? It means resembling copper. Has anyone seen the periodic table? Yeah. Who knows what the symbol is for copper? Cu, right? And that's because the Latin word for copper is cupro. So cupreous is just the adjective form of that. So it's, yeah? Almost. So the adjective for Latin is eous. Almost. So you don't need the H at the beginning because it's just cupro. So cupreous. Cupreous. So what about the word executive? It's two below that. The executive office or an executive official. Yeah?
EXECUTIVE.
Right. And so what's another word that's related to this? Execute? So someone who is an executive is the person who executes orders, right? They do stuff. So you have the word executive. Now this is a challenging biology word. Lamellae. Lamellae, or sometimes it can also be lamellae. So how do you spell lamellae? Yeah? Not exactly. So if you remember the rule, going back to the previous slide, how do you spell E if it's a plural? A-E. Right? So if you have E in Latin, you spell it with a L-A-M-E-L-L-A-E. So it's actually the plural of lamella. What about cockeye? Has anyone heard of staph or staphylococci? Or staphylococcus? Yeah? So cockeye is the plural of coccus, which means a spherical bacteria. Let's just spell that. Yeah? Mm-hmm. C-O-C-C-I. There we go. And that's the plural of coccus, right? Okay. So a campaign. You guys have heard the word campaign in the news, right? The presidential campaign. How do you spell campaign? Yes. Yep. C-A-M-P-A-I-G-N. So the A sound is an A-I-G-N. So the N sound here is a G-N. And then what about malign? Yeah? Almost. This is M-A-L-I-G-N. Okay. Then you have the word that's ampullaceous. This is a weird word too. Ampullaceous means shaped like a flask. Does anyone want to give it a try? It's pretty challenging. Did you want to go? Almost. So it's actually A-M-P-U-L-L-A-C-E-O-U-S. Did anyone come close to this? Yeah? Good. Alright. So what about the next word? Vigentennial. It means occurring every 20 years. Vigentennial. Yeah? V-I-G-E-N-T-E-N-N-I-A-L. Great job. There we go. That's vigentennial. V-I-G-E-N-T-E-N-N-I-A-L. What about a vacary? A place where cows are kept. Yeah?
V-A-C-A-R-Y.
Almost. So vacary is actually V-A-C-C-A-R-Y. Now, interesting tip. Anyone here was in 7th grade? Anyone going to 7th grade? Yeah? So some of you were in 7th grade. Y'all had Texas history, right? One of the explorers, his name was Cabeza de Vaca. What does Cabeza de Vaca mean? Yeah? Head of the cow. And so cabeza means head, right? And vaca means cow. So that's Spanish. And this is Latin. So vacary is a place where you keep cows because vac, again, means cow. It's all related. Yeah?
And then there's vaccine.
Right? So you have vaccines. Which, the first vaccine, does anyone know what it was for? Yeah?
Cowpox.
Cowpox, exactly. Good job. Yeah. Yep. So, another word that's related to this wants to spell centennial. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Almost. Anyone else? Yeah?
S-E-N-T-E-N-I-A-L.
Almost. Yeah? One more letter. So centennial means C-E-N-T-E-N-N-I-A-L, right? Who wants to spell the word perennial? Yeah?
P-E-R-E-N-N-I-A-L.
Good. So what do all of these have to do with? Yeah? Right. An amount of years, exactly. So what do you call something that happens every year? Annual? I think I heard someone say it. So you have annual, right? How many of you have gone to Home Depot or Lowe's and bought some plants? Yeah? Have you seen plants that said like biennial? So every 2 years, or twice a year, depending on which part of the word it's in. And that's consign, to sign something over. Oop, disaster. No, not that. That's my wallpaper. Sorry. Here we go. Great. Not to the beginning. Don't go there. And we were over here. We were done with this. And done with this. So, just going over a few more Latin words, right? What did you guys learn about Latin today? Anything is good, yeah.
They use C's instead of K's.
They use C's instead of K's. Great tip. That will be very helpful because it's very, very rare that you see a K in Latin. Anything else? Yeah. The plural for E is AE. So if you hear E and it's a plural noun when you ask for the part of speech, you know that'll be spelled AE. Anyone else? Yeah. The U sound, the oo sound, is spelled with the oo. Anyone else? I see lots of hands. Yeah? I'm sorry, can you say that again? Yeah. That's good. Anything else? So you guys want to go over this a little bit more? Let's go back to the beginning and just go back through this. So we learned about where these languages come from, right? Where you have a whole bunch of languages across the world that kind of came together in their own little way, and English kind of just pulls words from each of them. That's this. And then you learned about how English did the same thing over time. You know, they got a whole bunch of words from different languages. And then you learned about how you can see, parallels between words of different languages. So you have words like caliente and calorie that come from the same root. Then we looked at how the S sound can be spelled a variety of ways, with an S, a C, an SC, an SS, or a CE, right? Can someone give me examples of words with each of these? That's simple. You can cheat and use words from up there. Yeah. Science, exactly. So you have an SC and a CE, both in one word. Then we learned about these words that have examples of the SC, CE, SS. And then the K sound can have a C, a CC, or a CH, or a CCH. But the Kwa sound is usually just a QU, right? So you have words with a CH, a QU, a C, and then, cool enough, the OO is just U. If you have a U sound, sometimes you can have EU at the beginning also. Does anyone know what EU can also mean if it comes from Greek? EU can mean good if it comes from Greek. So has anyone heard of, in biology, the domain eubacteria? Yeah? So eubacteria originally meant good bacteria. And then it included a whole bunch of bacteria that weren't as good, but anyway. And then gus has the X sound, like exaggerate. And then at the end of a plural, you can have AE, or if the singular noun was a US, that means you have an I. That works either way. So if you're asked for the plural noun, right, and it says I, like stimuli, just think to yourself, is the singular noun stimulus? And then you know that the plural is going to be spelled with an I. Whereas if you have an AE, then you think it's not algus, it's alga. And so you're going to have algae. And so you have words for those. And then you have these. And that is kind of all we're going to do for Latin. And so next week we're going to do Greek words. Okay? Anybody have any questions? Love to answer. Yes? For spelling or in general? As far as daily practice goes, I think it's just however much you feel like doing yourself. And so that sounds like a really vague answer, but I know, for example, when I was doing spelling bee at the Westbrook, I had a whole bunch of homework. So I didn't get to doing spelling until I was way done with my homework, and that took a long time for me to do. So especially because learning words and learning spelling, especially through like vocabulary and new words, has to do a lot with what you are motivated to do yourself. And so just do what you find interesting and try to fit in as much time if you're going for a competition. Try to fit in as much time as you can. Anyone else? It's really interesting looking at these languages, so I'd love to answer questions. Yeah? Yeah, so Latin was spoken in areas like Rome, right? And it kind of dissipated as a language in like real life a long time ago, but it still lives on in a whole bunch of the words that we have in the languages we have today. Exactly. So a really interesting place where you see a whole bunch of Latin terminology is in medicine and biology. So you guys know of like taxonomy, right? How you have like genuses and species. All of those words, almost all of them are from Latin. And the same thing in the medical field. If you know anyone who's a doctor, a whole bunch of the terms they use, like for bacteria and diseases, come from Latin. Anything else? Yeah.
You said something on YouTube?
Yes. So if you go to YouTube and look up Friends with Public Library Spelling Bee Workshop, you'll be able to find the workshop right there. So it's kind of like this. It's longer, and I actually go through a whole bunch of different patterns, and not exactly languages specifically, but more patterns and more words. And so especially things like reading the diacritical markings. So if you go back and look at this, so each of these are how to pronounce the word in pronunciation symbols. And in that workshop, I taught how to read those and understand the pronunciation of the word when you don't have the spelling of the word in front of you. Right. And so learning the diacritical markings is really helpful for getting started in the bee, because as I said before, not every word is pronounced the same way that it's spelled, and not every word is spelled the way that it's pronounced. And so learning that is a really basic step in getting forward to even more complicated words, because you need to be able to know how exactly it's pronounced in a bee, or actually in a dictionary. Great. I think we're good. How many of you guys think Latin is kind of interesting? Yeah, that's good to hear. How many of you think it's kind of weird? I remember I thought it was kind of weird. Because, you know, it's not every day that you hear a Latin word and think, oh my goodness, that's Latin, right? But if you actually go to the grocery store and you look at a carton, it's going to have some Latin words. And if you actually start looking for these patterns in your everyday life, a whole bunch of things like the spellings of words actually start making so much more sense. Because before it was just like, you know, why is this spelled this way? It doesn't make any sense. But after that, if you know it's Latin, then you can think, you know, in Latin, the U sound is just spelled with a U. And so you see a word that has a U, and you know how it's going to be pronounced. And if you hear that word, you know how it's going to be spelled too. Okay. So we good to go? Anything else? Right. So in the YouTube video, what I also have is some preliminary rules. So kind of going into the spelling bee, some things you need to know, some basic ways to get around, you know, the kind of questions you can ask, how rounds go in a spelling bee, how you progress through the years, that sort of deal. So I really recommend watching that, especially if you're interested in the spelling bee or leveling up in the spelling bee to, say, the next level of the bee. And so it'll really help you with some tips, basic level and some more intermediate level going into the bee. So how many of you are excited and want to do a spelling bee? Yeah, that's great, because I think the spelling bee really helped me in terms of learning vocabulary and new words, and especially looking at these languages and learning about the patterns. Right? Yeah. So the vocabulary, you know, a lot of the time you use vocabulary every day when you're writing, right? And especially things like SAT vocabulary. So I was able to get a 2400 in my SAT, and spelling bee definitely helped me with my vocabulary section. A lot of the words, I knew them way long before I'd even seen them because I did them in the spelling bee. Yeah? I can find the link to my YouTube video, and I'll actually put it with the Friends of the Library flyer as well. So
Each of these lessons will also be on YouTube.
each of these lessons will also be on YouTube, right? Yes, great. We're done. So we're good to go then, and see you guys next week. I'm really excited. Thank you. So today we're gonna do Greek, and it's gonna be a lot of fun and excitement because we have new and upgraded, interesting pictures to go with the word,
Okay.
which are always fun, right?
Yes.
All right.